What if your fatigue, mood disorder, or other chronic health conditions were rooted in issues at the cellular level? Today's discussion is all about mitochondrial health and what we can do to improve it. I'm Ryan. He's our expert functional medicine doctor, Dr. Erez. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about this fascinating topic today. I think we should probably start with the foundations of what mitochondria are. So we all remember in science class learning that mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, but can you refresh our memory and tell us more about that?
Yeah, totally. So this is kind of a classic analogy that we all learn, and it's pretty accurate. So just like a power station takes in fuel, the mitochondria take in our fuel, which is glucose and fatty acids, and then we're producing a form of energy or electricity. And so basically, the mitochondria take the glucose and fatty acids and they convert them into ATP, which is actually the cell's energy currency.
Awesome. Makes total sense. Thank you for that explanation. So it sounds like then if there are issues with the mitochondria, then there's probably going to be issues with your overall health, right?
Totally. Yeah. Big yes to that. So I see lots of patients in my clinic where, their central issue is a mitochondrial issue, the defect in the mitochondria that's causing brain fog, causing fatigue, causing neurological issues. So many different things that I see in the clinic actually relate back to the mitochondria.
Wow. So it's pretty common, huh?
Absolutely common. I'd say it's one of the underlying mechanisms that I see the most in patients.
Yeah, and with functional medicine, it really is all about getting to the root cause, and there's nothing more of a root cause than issues at the cellular level. So that makes total sense to me. What are some of those signs and symptoms of poor mitochondrial health?
Yeah, again, it kind of goes back to the areas of the body that use the mitochondria the most. And so one of those is the brain. The brain uses a huge amount of ATP. And if your mitochondria aren't functioning, then you're going to have brain fog. You're going to have mood disorders. You're going to have anxiety, all of those things in the brain. And then the muscles are another big user of our mitochondria. And mitochondria are extremely dense in the muscle. In fact, if you look at like a marathon runner, they have hundreds of times the mitochondrial density that a kind of a normal person would have. So you can see a huge variation. If you look at the actual cell, the actual muscle cell, you can see a real difference there. And the symptoms that you might experience, a big one that I see with my chronic fatigue patients is muscle soreness, really extreme muscle soreness, to the point where, if they exercise, they may be unable to continue exercising or have soreness for like 3, 4, 5, 6 days after they exercise for, a short amount of time. So it's really, really problematic. And, it's a big problem for patients because they can't exercise and they don't feel like they want to exercise because of that.
Yeah, I can see how that's definitely a problem. So what are some of those main causes of issues with the mitochondria? So we know that, like you just said, the symptoms can show up in, the brain and the muscles, but what are some of those causes that really affect the mitochondria?
I would say there's a lot of different causes for mitochondrial dysfunction that I see. And a big one is toxins, things like glyphosate, heavy metals, other toxins that we get in our foods, for example, like pesticides. And so that definitely is a big contributor. Another big one is going to be nutrient deficiencies. So there's a lot of cofactors and nutrients that are important to mitochondrial function. Things like CoQ10 and magnesium and L-carnitine. Those are all important cofactors in some of the enzymes in the mitochondria. And so if you don't have enough of those things, let's say getting those things through the diet, then your mitochondria can be sluggish.
So I would say then if people are exposed to toxins and they're not eating a nutritious diet, then they're probably in trouble.
Yeah, 100%. And that's actually a large percentage of people, living in the modern world is, those two issues. So absolutely.
Wow. And is there also a genetic factor in your mitochondrial health? I've heard that there is, but can you unpack that a little bit?
Totally, yeah. So mitochondria actually have their own mitochondrial DNA, which is really, really interesting, and you actually get it from your mother. So if your mother passes down, the mitochondrial DNA and it has a defect in it, then that can also impact your mitochondrial function. And a lot of these genetic, rather rare conditions, can really impact the mitochondria. So genes can definitely play a role.
Wow, that's fascinating. Does conventional medicine recognize mitochondrial health? Do they look into this? Do they take it seriously at all? Or is it mainly functional medicine doctors that, look into mitochondrial health?
Yeah, so it's definitely not a focus of conventional medicine other than these really rare conditions that are obvious, things like muscular dystrophy or, some of these retinal disorders that are really like genetic and right away, like, there's an issue. But there are a lot of, it's a spectrum of mitochondrial function. And so conventional medicine doesn't really look at that. It's like an all or nothing type of thing. I think functional medicine and integrative practitioners are much more likely to sort of help you with this sort of an issue, and explore it in a little bit more depth.
Got it. So then what is the first step for someone who suspects they might have poor cellular health? They have, maybe fatigue or brain fog, mood disorders. What should they do first? Should they contact functional medicine doctors? Should they try to work on this on their own? Should they, start trying to eat healthier? What should they do first?
I mean, I think working with a practitioner is awesome, and you're probably going to get the furthest doing that because, there are a lot of different testing, functional medicine testing that we can do to sort of narrow down, hey, is this a cofactor issue, a nutrient issue? Is it more of a toxin issue? Is it, genetics? So really getting to that, like what is actually underlying the issue here is going to be a little bit more effective. Not to say that you can't do anything on your own, because there are a lot of things, regarding exercise and just general nutrition where you can make a big impact. But I think it's really helpful to work with somebody who can narrow in on the actual issue.
Yeah, and so let's say that the findings of the testing show that it's one thing or another. Does the prescription in terms of lifestyle changes differ based on what you determine is the cause?
Totally, yeah. So, for example, I'll just give you an example. I frequently do nutrient testing with my patients, right? And part of that is oftentimes organic acid testing. And that gives us a sense of both mitochondrial function and your nutrient levels. And so if I see that you're, maybe missing a B vitamin or missing CoQ10 or missing some other nutrient, then I'm really going to narrow in on that. And we're going to, give you foods that are higher in those nutrients, give you supplements if needed. Another example would be we can actually figure out which protein in the mitochondria is the real issue. So there's kind of like this 4 different complexes in the mitochondria that the electrons flow down to produce the energy. And there's a test that we can do to sort of figure out which of those 4 proteins is really the biggest issue. And then give you specific treatments that are going to target the defect or the problem in those shuttling those electrons through those 4 protein complexes, I should say.
Right. Wow. So you can really pinpoint what the causes are.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, definitely not something that we had like 10 years ago, that sort of thing. So this is definitely new stuff that's coming out, and we can get way more targeted in our approach, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. So you mentioned that the modern world, essentially all of us, have the potential to have poor mitochondrial health based on toxin exposure, and less than optimal diet. So what would you just say in general you should do? Give me like 3 things maybe we should all do to support our cellular health and our mitochondria.
Yeah, I'll give you like the easy things that everybody should be doing. And one of those is getting a combination of zone 2 and some sort of high intensity interval training. That combination puts a lot of strain on the mitochondria and makes them more effective or efficient. And so you should be doing HIIT training, which is, again, kind of doing these spurts of slow heart rate mixed with a high heart rate. So low intensity followed by high intensity followed by low intensity. And then you should also be doing long sessions of zone 2 training, which you can look up. But basically it's getting your heart rate in a certain range and staying there for a decent amount of time. So 20 to 40 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week.
So that's more moderate, and then high intensity is more vigorous, correct?
Exactly. Yeah, and they both do different things to the mitochondria. So you want to get both of those things in so that you're really putting the most amount of stress on the mitochondria so that they can become more efficient.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's exercise. What about nutrition? What's a good nutritious diet, or what types of foods should you eat more often to support your cellular health?
Yeah, I mean, there's a tons of things. There's a lot of different things that I would suggest in the diet, but there are some high yield items that are maybe the most helpful. So one thing is an anti-inflammatory diet, because inflammation can really have a big impact on the mitochondria. And so eating anti-inflammatory foods, things like ginger and garlic, and foods that have a lot of color in them or anthocyanins in them. You want to eat a lot of plant material that comes from a variety of sources. So that's one thing. Another thing would be really making sure that you're getting the appropriate nutrients in. And so things like magnesium and creatine, which is found in mostly in meat products, but you can also get it as a supplement, of course. But creatine is actually really, really important for the mitochondria. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, you probably want to be supplementing with creatine. But if you do eat meat, then you want to make sure you're getting enough of it in the meat that you're eating.
Is there a third thing? So that's exercise. You gave me some specifics on nutrition. Is there one other thing you can do to improve your mitochondrial health?
You want to get into ketosis every once in a while to improve your mitochondrial function. And so when you switch between glucose burning and fat burning, you're making your mitochondria more efficient. And so every once in a while doing either intermittent fasting or longer periods of fasting is definitely going to be a good idea to kind of kickstart your mitochondria.
Love it. So it's good to be hungry every once in a while, right?
It is. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Cool. Sweet. So give me a patient example. So put it in perspective in the real world. Do you have any patient examples where you were able to turn around their cellular health and thus their overall health?
Yeah, I can think, just back to one recently, or I can do 2 if you want, but I had a patient who his main complaint was fatigue after eating. Really severe fatigue. I mean, he would eat and then suddenly feel super fatigued, and it wasn't a blood sugar issue. It was, we couldn't figure out what it was. It took us a while to figure. But when we did some testing, we figured out that his mitochondria wasn't working efficiently for a number of reasons. He wasn't just having that; he was having a ton of brain fog, a lot of mood irregularity. Both depression, irritability, anxiety, things like this. And then the last issue was the other thing that we talked about, which was he was unable to exercise. He used to be a bodybuilder, used to have muscle, used to be able to go to the gym consistently, feel good after exercising. And he just couldn't exercise anymore. It felt bad to him. He felt more anxious. He would get dizzy, and he couldn't really function after actually working out. So, So yeah, absolutely, this patient needed mitochondrial support, and when we gave him certain nutrients, in particular, he had one really bad nutrient deficiency that was a primary factor, and when we gave him that, he felt, all of these symptoms just disappeared. He was able to exercise, was no longer feeling bad energy and irritability and fatigue, and so it completely changed things for him.
That's incredible. Yeah, functional medicine truly is amazing. And maybe we'll save that second patient example for next time. But we've covered a lot today. We don't want to go too far in depth. We've talked about, what mitochondrial are, what causes mitochondrial dysfunction, how to support your mitochondrial health. And I think, again, this is a great place to stop. But what would you say is the best sort of first step for someone who is struggling with their energy, or they have mood disorders or some of those other chronic health conditions? What should they do first today?
Yeah, I mean, I would say reach out to somebody who can look at some of these basic causes for mitochondrial function issues. And, whether that be a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic physician, or just somebody who specializes in the mitochondria or deals with a lot of patients with those issues like chronic fatigue. But somebody who's actually going to look at the underlying causes, do testing, figure out what nutrient deficiencies there might be or other causes for mitochondrial dysfunction.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you guys all for watching, and we'll see you next time.